He must have seen her change before his eyes from his mother, a difficult woman but sometimes loving, to a smelly whorehouse madam instructing a green young customer. All bad enough, but he was sweet on the coterie girl, and that made it worse. Very young men cannot help but put their first loves on pedestals, and should someone come along and spit on the paragon, even if it happens to be one's mother. Faintly, I heard his door slam. And faint but audible sobbing. "You've hurt his feelings," I said. She expressed the opinion that feelings, like fairness, were also the last resort of weaklings. Then she held out her glass. I filled it, knowing she would remember none of what she'd said in the morning, always supposing she was still there to greet the morning, and would deny it, vehemently, if I told her. I had seen her in this state of drunkenness before, but not for years. We finished the second bottle, she did, and half of the third before her chin dropped onto her wine-stained bosom and she began to snore. Coming through her thus constricted throat, those snores sounded like the growling of an ill-tempered dog. I put my arm around her shoulders, hooked my hand into her armpit, and hauled her to her feet. She muttered protests and slapped weakly at me with one stinking hand. "Leave me alone. Want to go to sleep?" "And you will," I said. "But in your bed, not out here on the porch." I led her, stumbling and snoring, one eye shut and the other open in a bleary glare, across the sitting room. Henry's door opened. He stood in it, his face expressionless and much older than his years. He nodded at me. Just one single dip of the head, but it told me all I needed to know. I got her on the bed, took off her shoes, and left her there to snore with her legs spread and one hand dangling off the mattress. I went back into the sitting room and found Henry standing beside the radio Arlette had hounded me into buying the year before. "She can't say those things about Shannon," he whispered. "But she will," I said. "It's how she is, how the Lord made her. And she can't take me away from Shannon." "She'll do that, too," I said. "If we let her." "Couldn't you? Papa, couldn't you get your own lawyer?" "Do you think any lawyer whose services I could buy with the little bit of money I have in the bank could stand up to the lawyers Farrington would throw at us?" They swing weight in Hemmingford County, I swing nothing but a sickle when I want to cut hay. They want that 100 acres and she means for them to have it. This is the only way, but you have to help me. Will you? For a long time he said nothing. He lowered his head, and I could see tears dropping from his eyes to the hooked rug. Then he whispered, "Yes. But if I have to watch it, I'm not sure I can." There's a way you can help and still not have to watch. Go into the shed and fetch a burlap sack. He did as I asked. I went into the kitchen and got her sharpest butcher knife. When he came back with the sack and saw it, his face paled. Does it have to be that? Can't you? With a pillow? It would be too slow and too painful, I said. She'd struggle. He accepted that as if I had killed a dozen women before my wife and thus knew. But I didn't. All I knew was that in all my half-plans, my daydreams of being rid of her, in other words, I had always seen the knife I now held in my hand. And so the knife it would be. The knife or nothing. We stood there in the glow of the kerosene lamps. There'd be no electricity except for generators in Hemmingford home until 1928, looking at each other, the great night silence that exists out there in the middle of things broken only by the unlovely sound of her snores. Yet there was a third presence in that room, her ineluctable will, which existed separate of the woman herself. I thought I sensed it then, these 8 years later I am sure. This is a ghost story, but the ghost was there even before the woman it belonged to died. All right, Papa. We'll send her to heaven. Henry's face brightened at the thought. How hideous that seems to me now, especially when I think of how he finished up.